Now we are going to create our first entity, let's say person. So let's create a class. I'm creating under entity, so person. So as part of the person, I'll be having first name, last name, email, age, gender. Let's say I'm going to give PAN number. So along with this, we need to create setters and getters that we'll be creating after converting person into an entity. So how are you going to do that? We just need to annotate with entity, which is from the Jakarta persistence. And along with that, we need to give the table. So as part of it, here we can give the name, schema, and unique constraints if we have any. So in our case, I'm just giving the table name. So here I'm saying person underscore TB, just at the notation as table. And along with that, we need to provide a identifier, nothing but primary key, because each table needs to have one primary key. So let's initialize it as ID. And we need to annotate with ID saying that this is an identifier, and we can give that this is a generated value. And along with that, we can give as a sequence. So typically the sequence generator is not required in case of the earlier versions, but as part of the newer versions, it's suggested to create a sequence generator. So as part of the sequence generator annotation, we need to provide sequence name, in this case person, ID, sequence, and initial value as 1 and allocation size as 1. And along with that, we need to provide name also, which is required. It's a unique generated name that can be referred more than one classes. So in our case, simply we will be using person underscore ID because it is using for the ID. So let's format all of them. Now let's generate setters and getters using Eclipse setters and getters functionality. Let's select them all and generate it. Along with that, let's generate the toString also, string concatenation style. So generate it. So it will be creating person, ID, everything like this. So let's save the file, format it. Now we need to create a repository. The repository is an interface. So let's create an interface, and here I'm saying repository as a package, and here I'm saying person repository, and it's public, and it's going to extend interfaces. In our case, it is a JPA repository. As part of the JPA repository, here we need to give the person, and ID in our case is a long. So let's finish them. So import the person class. Now we successfully created a repository and an entity. So Spring will take care of initializing and creating the implementation for this repository and provides all our required functionality. So let's see what exactly JPA repository contains. As part of the JPA repository, it is extending list card repository, list paging and sorting, and query by example executor. So let's forget about all of things. Let's check the list card repository. So as part of the list card repository, it is extending card repository. Let's go to the card repository. It's extending repository. As part of the repository, it's a marker saying that interface is a repository. So if we come back to the card repository, as part of the card repository, we have save all, find by ID, exist by ID, find all by ID, count, delete by ID and by entity, delete all by ID, delete all these are been provided. Let's go to the list card. As part of the list card, we have all the card repository because we are extending it, and along with that, save all returns here a list. Find all provides the list, but in case of the card repository, save all gives the iteratable, and find all also gives the iteratable, but in case of the list, we directly get the list instead of the iterator. So it is a little bit beneficial for us to implement our functionality. And now as part of the JPA repository, we have the flush, save and flush, save all, the flush, and delete in batch, which is a deprecated, but we have another one, delete all in batch. So it's going to delete a few sets together from the list of entities. Delete all by IDs is there, delete all in batch, and several other functionalities has been provided. So let's create our first object and save it to the database. So let's go to our application. Let's create a person. Now we need to save this person object. So in order to get that, we need to have the repository. So all we need to do is auto-write the repository or inject into our application. So using, let's say, person repository and auto-write it. Add the annotation called auto-write. Now let's go to our run method and write person repository dot save and person. This is going to return a saved object. So let's say saved person. This is for our verifying purpose. After saving it, we need to know whether exactly same value has been given or not. But before that, we have not set the ID. So I'm expecting ID to be set. So I'm printing the ID, saved person ID. And along with that, I would like to print whole saved person object, saved person, save all files and run the application. So I'm running the application. Let's maximize the console. And if we see it, this is our starting point and the saved person ID is 1 and the whole object has been printed as part of this toString. PAN number has been set and we forgot to set the age. So by default it's 0 because it's a primitive data type, and email, last name, everything has been set. Now let's observe how table has been created, how sequence is created. So if we go here, we cannot see any of the queries that has been executed. The reason for it is by default it is not been logging into the console or the logs. So in order to get the SQLs, we need to add show SQL property, show SQL as true. Save the file and rerun the application. And this time you can see a set of queries has been printed here. So if you see it, here is the one. First one, table cascade and sequence. If it exists, it's dropping it and it's creating a sequence, person table sequence, start with 1 and incremented by 50, and create table, person table, age, ID, email, everything, and finally ID is the primary key. And as part of the insert, so insert query has been run, and before that it got the sequence from the table sequence. So this is how we are going to create our entity and the repository, and we are going to save it. Next we will check updating the same entity and deleting the entity and finding the entities using Spring repositories.